Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. My name is Bree Buonomo. Hi if you're new here, or hey if you've been here before. Today we are going to recap all of my NaNoWriMo experience for the year 2020. And I'm going to do that in kind of two ways. I'm going to talk about a little bit of the stats of just this month in general, including like when I was writing, how often I was writing, where I was most productive, etc. And I am going to use the Nano website for that, but I'm probably just going to tell you guys. And down below is my NaNoWriMo website if you guys want to follow along. I think that's how that works anyway, but yeah, so I'll do that as the first part, and then the second part I'm just going to kind of tell you some of my general thoughts and feelings, and did I succeed in some of the intentions that I set out for in the month. So without further ado, let's just jump into it. So now that NaNoWriMo is finished, kaput, we are done. I ended the entire month writing 50,316 words. If you guys have been here since October when I started talking about NaNoWriMo in all my Preptober videos, then you will know that my 50,300, whatever I just said, those words were over 2 novels. I started the month off starting a satire fantasy novel, which was an adult fantasy kind of playing on some of the classic tropes that are found in fantasy adventure quest novels. And I ended up writing 10,721 in that. However, after week 1, really. Week 1, I was struggling a little bit and I felt really off my writing game. So I stopped writing the satire and I jumped over to the mermaid. And really, the mermaid just became my main project. And I wrote 39,618 words, which gave me my grand total combining the two, but I will definitely say that the mermaid story just really shined. And I initially wanted to jump back and forth, but I also assumed that, if I felt a calling towards one of the stories, I was just going to go for it because this was a time to experiment. It was going to be a test to see if I can write 2 novels at once, but as I mentioned, a preference was made and mermaid won out. But I really love this story. I have no idea if it's ever going to be like good. We'll get there when we get there in the editing phases, but I currently, out of my mermaid, I have 19 chapters and I didn't finish 19. So I'm in the middle of a chapter where I left off as of the last day of Nano on the 30th. So I'm going to predict that this novel, and I don't know because I'm an underwriter a little bit, but I think I can make this draft like up to 90,000 words, if not 100,000. Because there's a lot that has to happen and I'm not even in the middle of my story yet. I know that. So yeah, we just have a lot more to write and I'm excited for it. So that is the kind of grand sum of what I've written. As I mentioned, if I'm going to continue, I'm definitely going to write both of those stories. And I'm happy that I at least started the satire because it was an idea I was playing around with for a while, but I just never had the inspiration to start it. At least where I left off in the satire, I feel like it's a good place to pick up and keep writing with a story. So if any point in time I feel called to write that, I'm going to head over and do so. But I think if I move forward as of like in December, for instance, or January, if I want to write something, I'm likely going to go back to mermaid because I feel so strongly about it at this point that I want to get a first draft out there. So that is the recap on my words. As far as everything else goes, out of the entire month, I only had 5 days where I didn't write anything at all. And honestly, one of those days I'm a little bit questioning because I think I didn't update my word total at like before midnight. So technically I think I actually only had 4 days, which was once a week. And that was pretty impressive for me to be honest, because I didn't intend, like that wasn't necessarily a goal of mine, was to like only have one non-writing day, but I'm kind of happy that I did that because I knew like it was going to be worthwhile to take breaks and treat myself not like a criminal if I didn't write one day, and that seemed to work out really well for me. So other than those 4 days where I didn't write anything at all, I had one particular weekend where I wrote the most. And of course, that was during the Small Author Tubers Write-a-thon for Nano, which was the 4th, 5th, and 6th of November. On the, I think it was the 5th, no, it was the 6th. On the 6th of November, I ended up writing over 6,000 words, I think, or was that Friday? One of the days I wrote I think I ended up writing on Friday like 6,000 words. And then I also wrote like 5,000 on Saturday, and total, maybe I was a little off, but I ended up almost at 12,000 words for the entire weekend, which obviously was the first full weekend of Nano. So it was like a really good place to be in, which also helped me on some of those off days where I didn't write any of those. I had a little bit in the bank to kind of like be like, oh, okay, we can miss this day. Overall, I was the most productive in the morning. So according to NaNoWriMo, because I was tracking my time on the website, and 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. always was my most productive day. During the first week, it was scaling towards the night because I was in a lot of later live streams when I was writing. But for the most part, I was always writing in the morning, and especially on the weekends, that like 9 to 11 o'clock, 9 to 12 o'clock was like such a sweet spot for me to get words in. So I did really well. I only wrote at home. As you guys know, I switched jobs at this point when this video is going up, but during the month of November, I was entirely with my original company, and that means I was very little in the office and I was a lot on the road, and I do not dictate. I cannot do it. My brain doesn't compute that well when I'm trying to write a story verbally. So I really had to be in this room and like in the zone to write with if I was writing at all. For the most part, I stayed at my desk. However, a couple times I did use the chair that's behind me, and a few other times I went upstairs in my living room and just kind of snuggled up and wrote up there a little bit. So I did have a little bit of variety, but 98% of the time I was right here. And again, this room makes me want to write. That's why I have this as my office. So it was fine for me. Essentially, I pretty much had the daily word goal. Like, it looked around like what the average is I write per day, and it was 1677, which is pretty much the average that I needed. A lot, especially the days, I think that ended up averaging out because I had some 0 word days, and I had like 1 or 2 that was only like a couple hundred. It was very low. But the days, a lot of times when I sat down to write for like an hour to 2 hours, I got between 2,000 and 3,000 words any given time, pretty much. It was very rare, unless I was really just trying to push myself to write something that day. It was very rare that I had under 2,000 words in one writing session. And again, that was only for an hour to 2 hours. So I think just something that I can take from NaNoWriMo for myself is that if I just make sure that I have like 3 days a week to write for about 2 hours, I can make a really good timeline for writing a book. And that's something for me that I appreciate knowing about myself now, because if I ever get traditionally published and I have deadlines, I have a better understanding of what I'm actually capable of. And that is, I think, a very powerful thing that I learned during this Nano. And with that, I am going to kind of move into some of my lessons that I learned and just my overall thoughts, I think, because that was a big one, is I just really learned what my capabilities are as a writer. As I mentioned in my last vlog, if you watched it, and if you don't, I'll repeat here, but I went into this Nano knowing that I've already won Nano before. I won Nano in 2018 for the first time after many failed attempts of trying Nano. And I really will say that most of the time, the previous attempts of Nano were I just didn't put any effort into it. I would write maybe a day or 2 days, and then I would just completely fall off the wagon. A lot of times I was working on my co-written project on the side of Nano, and I just never had that internal drive to do anything by myself. So going into those Nanos prior to 2018, I just didn't really give a lot of effort. 2018 happened, and I wrote a lot, and I think I finished Nano, I think with 53,000. And then I added a little bit more after like the first 2 weeks of December to actually finish the book. But I knew I could do it. 50,000 words seems like a lot, but I did it once. last year came around in 2019 and my mental health wasn't the best at the time. I really was struggling writing and I was just struggling to find my place, especially on YouTube and the writing community. And I was dealing with imposter syndrome quite often. So I tanked Nano. I still wrote and I did not write nearly as much and I wasn't as consistent as I was this year or in 2018, but I wrote and I finished with like 25,000 words. So half of 50,000, which was great, but I was really disappointed in myself. And this year I just decided we are not putting pressure on myself, because the first week of Nano, and I will say maybe the first like 3 days of Nano of this year, I was getting into such a funk because I had the pressure to vlog on from myself. No one pressured me, just myself, that I like wanted to perform and like provide comments and just provide videos for people. And I was like really getting more into the fact of like the vlogging rather than the actual writing. And that was hindering me. So I really tried to rebalance and reprioritize what I was doing, which meant if sometimes I just didn't have the vlog content, I didn't have the vlog content. And I was writing something that I really wanted to write. And I was reminding myself constantly that first week that I am just here to do what I want to do, not what anyone else wants me to do. And that finally got me out of this like potential slogging down that I could have fell into and repeated last year where I was. But with that said, after I moved forward and I got over that kind of weird mentality, it was smooth sailing from there. And it literally was the most relaxing, chilled NaNoWriMo I could have ever asked for. I wrote when I wanted to write. I wrote often when I was in that mood. And I wrote well and fast when I was in that mood. And on the days that I didn't write, I just didn't write, and that was okay. And I kind of reorganized and planned things a little bit better. I really did well with that, and I personally am proud of myself just for not burning myself out and not hating what I was doing. Because at the end of the day, I was just having fun. I am not published right now. I'm not presenting this book to anyone anytime soon, and that's fine with me. The second thing that I want to touch on is just in general some of the takeaways for my live streams. And this isn't really anything crazy, but I do just want to say that the live streams really helped me out because it had like that sense of community. Because as an extrovert, I love live streams and I love talking to people, but it was such a good way to keep accountability. Because sometimes when you're in person with people, and if it was a normal year, if I was in person with anyone, because I wasn't this year at all, but if I was, it's so tempting to talk to people and just talk and talk and talk and talk and talk, because I don't know, that instant communication, it might be the fact that I'm a therapist and if you're in front of me, it's like, oh, we're talking right now. However, removing that physical presence reminds me sometimes that we're here for a reason. So every time I would get in the live stream, I absolutely adored every single person I streamed with this month. I made some really great friends over the last 2 months, and I'm just so thankful that that happened and that we have such a great community with our little corner of AuthorTube. And I really have to thank Autumn for that, because Autumn Ashley put together the small AuthorTuber write-a-thon, and without that and being a part of it, I might not have met some of these wonderful people. So because of that though, I was able to kind of balance that hanging out vibe and that like talking about our writing, as well as like, we're here for business, let's get down to it. And I was just really productive most of the streams that I was in. And I also participated in some that just I either wasn't hosting and or wasn't in, and was just like celebrating and like rooting on people, and that was really fun too. So overall, I really loved the live stream experience. My takeaway from that overall is that I really can only commit myself to live streams when it's a heavy intensive writing. So like maybe you will expect camp nanos and NaNoWriMo. So April, July, and November, those are likely going to be the only ones that I'm going to have heavy writing streams for moving forward, because I burned myself out a little bit having so many streams, and also they just take a lot of time because you have to prepare and you have to, if you're hosting, you have to make sure you have everything ready to go, and you're like helping people and you're clicking banners and you're doing this. So it's just very brain consuming in general. So I think like, especially in December, I'm already kind of like distancing myself a little bit and just giving myself a breather, because it can be very overwhelming. So yeah, that's just my takeaway from that. Also, just touching back on my Preptober work as like some of my third area of takeaways. I did have a couple goals for myself, including like rewards and exercise. And, I just want to be upfront and real. I mean, part of this was I already mentioned I wanted to write 2 books, and I initially thought I would be switching on and off throughout them. However, I'm not mad at it. I ended up really falling in love with one of my stories a little bit more presently, and that's the story I decided to go with. And if I kept going in that back and forth manner, I think I would have just fizzled out because I wasn't invested in the second story as much as I was the first story. As far as my exercise goes, the exercise plan went absolutely haywire. And partly I think I just overcommitted myself with the amount of time that I thought I was going to have, because I'm terrible at time management if I don't have everything written down to the T. Especially if someone comes in and is like, do you want to do something, or do you want to play a video game? Do you want to watch a movie? I have a very hard time shifting things in my mind. So what ends up happening is that I will have like an entire day planned. And if one thing takes a little bit of that away and it's a bigger chunk, then whatever came after that just falls, because I can't rearrange it very well. So that's pretty much what happened with the exercise. I did exercise, and I exercised a little bit more consistently than I had been, but the yoga went completely off the deep end. I think I did yoga 3 times or 4 times the entire month. I did do some running on my treadmill. I also danced a couple times. So I did other things, thankfully. And I went for walks outside with my dog occasionally as well, when the weather was a little bit better. But we failed on the exercise part. So I am just being honest. As far as the rewards aspect goes as well, I really I don't know. I wasn't really sold on rewards to begin with, because again, I'm someone who, I'm going to buy something if I want it. I'm going to take something if I want it. If I want to play video games, if I want to take a break, I'm just going to do it, because I feel like I can't justify waiting on something, especially because it's almost the opposite effect for me, where it's if I'm perpetually punishing myself before I can get something, then I'm either going to eventually just cave and get it anyway, or I'm just going to be miserable moving forward. So I don't really have much to say about the rewards aspect, just because I didn't really do anything specifically because of hitting a goal. Most of the time, I barely even acknowledged the goals I was hitting. And last year, which is again maybe why it worked out better this year, because I had written out on my calendar what days I wanted to hit what goals by, and where I would reward myself. I didn't do any of that, and it worked out well. So just saying. And as far as the music that I used to, I pretty much stuck to exactly what I already said I was going to listen to. It was mainly Lindsey Stirling though. Lindsey Stirling came out with the Artemis album. I think it was last year already, but I never listened to the album full through. And while I was writing this year, a lot of her songs from Artemis came on my Pandora, and I am just obsessed with that album. It is such a good album. So I ended up a lot of times I would just go onto YouTube and play the Lindsey Stirling entire album on YouTube instead of actually even using my Pandora station. So yeah, I highly recommend, if you haven't checked out Artemis, to do so, especially if you like Lindsey Stirling's other music, because I love the storytelling, and you could definitely just hear feel the vibes that are going through the entire album, from this hopeful journey to this questioning to the end being, getting to your destination kind of vibe. That's the vibe the entire album gets, and I love it. So otherwise, honestly, I feel like I summed up pretty much all of my thoughts, and I'm sure I will post this video and then think of 10 more things, because that's how your brain works. NaNoWriMo just ended, and there's just going to be so many things to think about and process and kind of take moving forward. But overall, I really did have a wonderful month, and just kind of touching upon the year in general, it has been such an up and down year for me, as it has been with so many people, and some to even more of a degree. But back in April of this year, when the world was really on fire, hardcore, everything was terrifying and scary, I attempted to do Camp Nano, and I wanted to edit my fantasy book that I'm currently editing right now that I put on the back burner for NaNoWriMo 2020. However, back in April, I just really, my creative spark like burned out. And I was really, really afraid that I'm like, I was back into that imposter syndrome where I'm like, am I even qualified to do YouTube? Am I qualified to talk about my writing? Am I good enough to be a writer? Am I ever going to get anywhere with my writing? And, you know, if I don't, like, does that make me a failure? I had a lot of these questions going through my head in camp April. And I did let it get to me for a little while. However, when June came around, I was really starting to like take back my creativity and take back my positivity. And I just really wanted to have a better mind frame about everything in my life. I met Autumn through Instagram, and me and her started live streaming together and just really talking and getting close. And that opened me up as well to other possibilities. For instance, I know me and Hudson had talked in the past, but like we got really close over the summer as well. And then of course I ended up making a lot more friends like Diane and Brooke and Angela and Sarah and the other Sarah. And I could probably go on. There's Maddie and Helene, and there's just so many wonderful people who are now in my life. I didn't really stream a lot of some of my other like possible friends. I would consider them friends, but like RP and Kelly and Zara as well. I've talked with them in the past and I've streamed with them in the past at this point. Nano got a little wild, but you know, it's just been really great to just be able to talk to so many different people in so many different areas of the world as well. And I didn't have that in April. So by the time July came around, like I said, I was already really feeling excited to get back into writing and creating. That Camp April, I like completed so many different things. I completed the novel that I started last NaNoWriMo, last November, and I finished it. I finished the first draft, I should say. I didn't finish, like I have to go back and edit, but I finished that. I wrote a completely new short story. I finished a short story. I finished a chapter that I was starting for a project with other people. And I wrote poetry again for the first time in forever. And I really, coming into NaNoWriMo 2020, I was kind of like afraid that I had such a high in July that I was going to just fizzle out completely. But as I mentioned, I really worked really hard in the first week to make sure that that negative mind frame didn't get to me, because every day I'm out here and I'm writing and that's showing something. I have something to show for it. So I'm just kind of using that as my motivation that, you know, worst case scenario, later down the road, if I never am able to get an agent, then you know what, whatever, I will self-publish and I will be happy with it because I will promote the heck out of it. Or conversely, if I am able to get an agent one day and I am successful with that agent, then I have an entire backlist of books that I can always go back on. So that's really, again, how I'm viewing all of these things that I'm working on, is that, you know, I have 2 books that are like my 2 things that I would really want to push forward with. And those are in like the further stages, but like all of these little side projects that I have, they're worth something to someone someday. So yeah, overall, I really did have a great month. I know not everyone has been in the same boat, but I, you know, just as I'm here and talking about it and being positive, you know, like I said, everything that you do is something and you're working towards it and you're going to get there. So yeah. Thank you guys for following this journey. As I mentioned, there might be more thoughts, you know, that I have on NaNoWriMo, but, you know, let me know down below if you have any questions and maybe we can further discuss any of these things. But also let me know how you did and what your own takeaways from NaNoWriMo 2020 were. If you were successful, if you weren't successful, things that you might do differently next year, things that you want to try next year, or in general, anything that you started to do during NaNoWriMo that you want to move forward with and keep doing once you are out of the season. So December and January and further on. So let me know all of that good stuff. And until next time, I will see you then. Bye.